The thunder crashed as Clara Adams watched in horror as the old wooden bridge beneath her feet groaned, planks splintering away into the raging river below. In a single terrifying moment, she found herself suspended in midair, the skirts of her emerald green traveling dress billowing around her like wings that could not fly. She had barely time to scream before the entire structure gave way, plunging her toward the churning waters 60 feet below. "Hold on," came a deep voice, and suddenly a strong arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her sideways through the air. She collided with a solid chest as the man who had leapt from the riverbank swung them both toward the rocky cliff face, his free hand clutching a thick rope that had been secured to a sturdy pine tree. They slammed against the cliff wall, the impact sending pain shooting through Clara's shoulder, but the stranger's grip held firm. Her heart pounded wildly as she looked up into the face of her rescuer, a sun-bronzed cowboy with eyes the color of a summer storm. "I've got you, madam," he said, his voice steady despite their precarious situation dangling above the rapids. "Name's Preston Garner. And if you don't mind my saying so, this isn't the usual way I make a lady's acquaintance." Colorado Territory, 1875. Clara had arrived just 3 days prior, her dreams of teaching at the newly established school in White Rock Canyon all but crushed when she'd learned that the town council had hired another instructor, a man, despite her written agreement. With nowhere to go and limited funds, she had been forced to seek temporary accommodations at the town's only boarding house while she figured out her next move. Now, as Preston Garner carefully maneuvered them both up the cliff face using the strength of his arms and the leverage of his boots against the rock, Clara wondered if she would live long enough to worry about employment at all. "Almost there," Preston called over the roar of the water. "When I give the word, I need you to reach for that outcropping above your head." Clara nodded, too frightened to speak. Her fingers found purchase on the rough stone, and with a mighty heave, Preston pushed her upward until she scrambled onto the relatively stable ground of the path that led to the bridge, or what remained of it. He pulled himself up beside her moments later, his breathing heavy but controlled. For the first time, Clara had a proper look at her savior. Tall and lean, with broad shoulders and capable hands, Preston Garner cut an impressive figure in his practical trail clothes. A dust-covered hat lay on the ground where he'd apparently tossed it before making his death-defying leap. "Thank you," Clara managed, her voice trembling. I don't know how to repay you. You saved my life." Preston retrieved his hat, brushing it against his leg before setting it back on his head. "No need for payment, Mississippi. Adams. Clara Adams. Miss Adams. Anyone would have done the same." Clara glanced back at the destroyed bridge and the churning waters below. "I rather doubt that, Mr. Garner." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair point. What brings you out to this crossing anyway? It's not exactly on the main road to anywhere." Clara attempted to straighten her disheveled appearance, suddenly aware of how her hair had come loose from its pins and how her dress clung to her in most improper ways. "I was exploring. I arrived in White Rock a few days ago expecting to take a position as the schoolteacher, only to discover they'd given it to someone else." Preston's eyes narrowed. "That would be Thomas Wilson, Mayor's nephew from back east. I heard something about that." He shook his head. "Not right, going back on an agreement like that." "Yes, well, apparently the good people of White Rock prefer their educators to be men." Clara couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Not all of us," Preston said quietly. He glanced at the sky, where dark clouds continued to gather. "We should get moving before this storm picks up. My ranch is about 3 miles west of here. I can offer you a hot meal and dry clothes before taking you back to town." Clara hesitated, weighing her limited options. Returning to White Rock meant facing another night at Mrs. Huxley's boarding house, where the landlady made it clear that without steady employment, Clara's stay would need to be brief. The storm was intensifying, and her ordeal at the bridge had left her shaken. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Garner, but a crack of lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening boom of thunder. Fat raindrops began to fall. Preston raised an eyebrow. "You were saying?" Clara smiled despite herself. "I suppose I would be grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Garner." He led her to where his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, was tethered to a tree. "This is Rusty. He's strong enough to carry us both back to the ranch." Preston mounted first, then extended his hand. "If you'll permit me." Clara took his hand, and with surprising grace, he swung her up to sit sideways in front of him. One strong arm circled her waist to keep her secure as he guided Rusty away from the bridge and onto a narrow trail that wound through pine trees and rocky outcroppings. The rain began to fall in earnest, and Preston urged Rusty to a faster pace. Clara found herself pressed against the cowboy's chest, the steady beat of his heart oddly reassuring against her back. They rode in silence for a time, the only sounds the rhythmic hoofbeats and the rain pattering on the leaves above. "May I ask what brought you to Colorado Territory, Miss Adams?" Preston's voice was close to her ear. Clara had to raise her voice slightly to be heard over the rain. "I came from Boston. My father was a professor at a university there. After he died last year, there wasn't much keeping me in the East. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Clara hesitated before adding, "He always encouraged my education and believed women should have the same opportunities as men. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in White Rock, it seemed like a fresh start." "And now?" Preston asked. Clara sighed. "Now I have exactly $23 to my name and no prospects." Preston was quiet for a moment. "I might know of something. No promises, but there's a settlement about 10 miles north of my ranch. Silver Creek. They've been talking about starting a school, but haven't had anyone qualified to teach." Hope flickered in Clara's chest. "Really? Do you think they would consider a woman?" "Silver Creek's different from White Rock. More practical, less concerned with appearances. If you can teach, they'd be fools not to hire you." The trail widened as they emerged from the trees, and Clara caught her first glimpse of Preston Garner's ranch. It wasn't the largest spread she'd seen since arriving in the territory, but it was impressive nonetheless. A sturdy two-story house stood on a gentle rise, with a barn and several outbuildings arranged nearby. Fenced pastures stretched toward distant hills, and a creek wound through the property. "Welcome to Sunrise Ranch," Preston said, a note of pride in his voice. "Not much compared to what you might be used to in Boston, but it's home." "It's beautiful," Clara said honestly. They rode up to the house just as the rain became a downpour. Preston dismounted quickly and lifted Clara down before leading Rusty to a covered area beside the house. He tied the horse and grabbed a saddlebag, then guided Clara up the steps to the porch. "Rosa," Preston called as they entered. "We have a guest." A woman in her 50s emerged from what Clara assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her brown eyes widened at the sight of Clara's bedraggled appearance.
"Dios mío!"
"What happened?" she exclaimed. "Bridge at Eagle Pass collapsed. Miss Adams here nearly went for an unplanned swim. I was on my way back from checking the north pasture, and happened to be there." Preston removed his hat and coat, hanging them on pegs by the door. Rosa clicked her tongue. "I told you that bridge was not safe, Preston. Did I not say this last month?" She turned to Clara with a warm smile.
"Come, señorita."
"We must get you dry clothes before you catch death." Before Clara could respond, Rosa had taken her arm and was guiding her toward a staircase. Preston's sister left some dresses when she married and moved to Denver. "You are about her size, I think." "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose," Clara protested weakly, although the thought of dry clothes was immensely appealing. "Nonsense," Rosa said firmly. "It is no imposition. Those dresses sit in a trunk gathering dust. Margaret would be happy they are of use." 20 minutes later, Clara descended the stairs feeling considerably better. She wore a simple blue dress that fit remarkably well, and Rosa had helped her dry and pin up her hair. The older woman had explained that she had worked for the Garner family for many years, first for Preston's parents and now for Preston since he had inherited the ranch 5 years ago. Preston stood when she entered the sitting room, and Clara was struck again by how handsome he was. Clean-shaven with strong features and those remarkable gray eyes, he had changed into dry clothes as well as a clean shirt and dark trousers that emphasized his lean strength. "Miss Adams," he said with a slight bow. "You look much improved." "Thank you. And please call me Clara." "Clara," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. "Dinner will be ready soon. Would you care for some coffee to warm up in the meantime?" They sat in comfortable chairs near the fireplace, where a cheerful blaze had been lit against the damp chill of the evening. Preston poured coffee from a pot kept warm on the hearth. "Have you always been a rancher?" Clara asked, cradling the warm cup in her hands. Preston leaned back in his chair. "Not always. My father started this place when I was 10. Before that, we moved around a lot. He tried his hand at mining, freight hauling, even ran a general store for a while in Kansas." He smiled at some memory. "Nothing stuck until we came to Colorado. Something about this land spoke to him. To me too, I suppose." "And your mother?" A shadow crossed his face. "She died on the journey west."
Cholera.
"I was 8. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. Preston nodded his acknowledgement. "My father remarried a few years later. Margaret's mother. She passed when Maggie was 15. Been just me running things since Pa died, though Rosa keeps claiming she's the one in charge." He said the last part loudly enough for the woman to hear from the kitchen. "I heard that," Rosa called back, and Preston grinned. "Tell me about your teaching," he said, changing the subject. "What subjects do you cover?" Clara straightened, warming to a topic she was passionate about. "I was educated at a women's college in Massachusetts. I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and basic sciences. I also play piano and can offer music instruction." Preston looked impressed. "That's quite a list. Silver Creek would be lucky to have you." "If they'll have me," Clara reminded him. "They will," Preston said with certainty. "I know Jacob Winters, who heads up the town council there.
Praktikal Mann.
Values education highly, has 4 children of his own. I'll take you to meet him tomorrow if you're willing." "I would appreciate that very much," Clara said, feeling a flutter of hope. Rosa announced dinner, and they moved to a sturdy oak table in the dining room. The meal was simple but delicious: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Clara found herself relaxing in the warm, comfortable atmosphere of Preston's home. After dinner, Rosa retired to her small cabin behind the main house, leaving Clara and Preston alone. They returned to the sitting room, where Preston added another log to the fire. "The storm's still strong," he observed, glancing out the window at the darkness broken by flashes of lightning. "You're welcome to stay in Margaret's old room tonight. I'll take you to Silver Creek in the morning." "Thank you," Clara said, feeling a strange mixture of relief and something else she couldn't quite name. "You've been extraordinarily kind to a stranger." Preston settled back in his chair. "Out here, kindness isn't extraordinary, it's necessary. Folks depend on each other to survive." He smiled slightly. "Though I have to admit, I don't usually rescue beautiful women from collapsing bridges." Clara felt color rise in her cheeks at being called beautiful. "Does that happen often? Bridges collapsing, I mean." "That particular bridge has been trouble for years. The county was supposed to replace it this spring, but funds got diverted to repair the main road to Denver instead." He frowned. "I'll need to get word to the sheriff about it before someone else tries to cross." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily between them. Clara told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's progressive views on women's education, and about her dream of starting a school where girls would receive the same quality of instruction as boys. Preston spoke of ranch life, of his plans to expand his cattle operation, and of the challenges facing the territory as more settlers arrived each year. It was late when Clara finally retired to Margaret's room, a cozy space with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains at the window that fluttered in the occasional draft. Despite her ordeal earlier in the day, or perhaps because of the exhaustion it had caused, she fell asleep almost immediately. Morning brought clear skies and a renewed sense of purpose. After breakfast, Preston saddled 2 horses, Rusty for himself and a gentle mare named Daisy for Clara. "Can you ride?" he asked as he helped adjust her stirrups. "I had lessons in Boston," Clara assured him, "though it's been some time since I've ridden regularly." "Daisy will take good care of you," Preston promised. "She's got more sense than most people I know." The ride to Silver Creek took just over an hour, giving Clara time to appreciate the beauty of the landscape. The recent rain had brought out vibrant greens in the meadows, and wildflowers dotted the hillsides. Preston pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area, including a humorous tale about his first cattle drive that had Clara laughing until her sides hurt. Silver Creek proved to be a small but thriving settlement nestled in a valley. It wasn't as established as White Rock, but Clara could see signs of growth: new buildings under construction, a general store with a fresh coat of paint, and children playing in front of a church. Preston led her to a 2-story building that served as both the town hall and Jacob Winter's law office. The meeting with Winters went better than Clara had dared hope. The balding, bespectacled man listened attentively to her credentials, asked thoughtful questions about her teaching philosophy, and seemed genuinely impressed by her answers. "We've been saving to hire a teacher," Winters explained. "Got 18 children of school age in town, and more in the outlying farms. Building's almost ready, just needs furnishing." He studied Clara for a moment. "Garner here speaks highly of you, and his judgment's usually sound. When can you start?" Clara blinked in surprise. "You're offering me the position?" "Just like that." Winters chuckled. "Miss Adams, I've interviewed exactly 0 other candidates. We need a teacher, you need a position, and you're clearly qualified. Seems simple enough to me." They discussed salary and accommodations. The town would provide a small house behind the schoolhouse and a modest but fair wage. Clara would be expected to start in 2 weeks, when the school building was completed. As they rode back to Preston's ranch, Clara could hardly contain her excitement. "I can't believe it happened so easily. In White Rock, they made me feel as though I was asking for the moon." Preston smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Told you Silver Creek was different. Practical folks who judge a person by what they can do, not where they came from, or—" He hesitated. "Or whether they wear trousers or skirts?" Clara supplied with a raised eyebrow. Preston laughed. "Exactly." They stopped by a stream to rest the horses and eat the lunch Rosa had packed for them. Sitting on a fallen log, Clara looked out at the mountains in the distance. "I think I'm going to love it here," she said softly. Preston studied her profile for a moment. "I think you will too." Then, with a hint of hesitation, "You're welcome to stay at the ranch until the schoolhouse is ready. Save you the cost of the boarding house in White Rock." Clara turned to him, surprised by the offer. "That's very generous, but I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition. We've got the room, and Rosa would appreciate the female company." He paused. "And I wouldn't mind the company either." There was something in his eyes, a warmth that made Clara's heart beat faster. "In that case, I accept." "Thank you." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Clara divided her time between preparing for her new position and helping around the ranch. She discovered she enjoyed the rhythm of ranch life: early mornings with coffee on the porch watching the sunrise, afternoons helping Rosa in the garden or kitchen, evenings spent in conversation with Preston. She also discovered she enjoyed Preston Garner's company more than she cared to admit. He was unlike any man she had met in Boston, straightforward yet thoughtful, strong yet gentle, confident without arrogance. He treated her as an equal, valued her opinions, and made her laugh with his dry wit. For his part, Preston found himself looking forward to evenings at home in a way he never had before. Clara brought life and light to the ranch house. Her passionate discussions about education, literature, and even politics challenged him, and her genuine interest in his work made him see the ranch through fresh eyes. One evening, about a week after Clara's arrival, Preston found her on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Beautiful night," he said, joining her at the railing.
She agreed.
"I never saw stars like this in Boston. Too many buildings, too many lamps." "One of the things I love about this place," Preston said, "makes a man feel both small and significant all at once." Clara glanced at him, surprised by the philosophical turn. "How so?" "Small because those stars have been there for countless lifetimes, will be there long after we're gone. Significant because we're here to see them, to appreciate them." He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious.
"Sorry."
"Not usually given to such musings. Don't apologize. I like it." Clara's voice was soft in the darkness. Their hands rested side by side on the railing, almost touching. Preston was acutely aware of the small distance between them, of how easy it would be to bridge that gap. A wolf howled somewhere in the distance, breaking the spell. Preston cleared his throat. "We should turn in. Early start tomorrow if we're going to Silver Creek to check on the schoolhouse." Clara nodded, moving toward the door. "Good night, Preston." "Good night, Clara." The next morning, they rode to Silver Creek to find the schoolhouse nearly complete. Clara walked through the space with growing excitement, picturing where desks would go, planning how she would organize lessons. "It's perfect," she declared. "A bit sparse, but we can add what's needed over time." Preston leaned against the doorframe, watching her. Jacob mentioned the town's ordered books and slates from Denver. "Should arrive next week." Clara ran her hand along the surface of a rough-hewn teacher's desk. "I can't wait to begin. Thank you for bringing me here, Preston. If not for you." She trailed off, thinking of how differently things might have gone if he hadn't been at the bridge that day. "If not for me, someone else would have recognized your talents," he finished for her. "You're a remarkable woman, Clara Adams." Their eyes met across the empty schoolroom, and something shifted in the air between them. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a recognition that what she felt for this man was becoming more than gratitude or friendship. The moment was interrupted by Jacob Winters, who arrived with news about the cottage behind the school where Clara would live. Together, they inspected the small but tidy two-room dwelling, discussing what furnishings would be needed. On the ride back to the ranch, Preston seemed quieter than usual. Clara found herself stealing glances at his profile, admiring the strong line of his jaw and the way the sun brought out golden highlights in his brown hair. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked as they approached Sunrise Ranch. Preston seemed to shake himself from deep thoughts. "Just thinking about some ranch business. Nothing important." Clara didn't believe him, but didn't press the issue. That evening, after dinner, Preston announced he needed to ride to a neighboring ranch the next day to discuss a cattle purchase. "I'll be gone overnight. Rosa will be here if you need anything." "Of course," Clara said, trying to hide her disappointment. She had grown used to their daily conversations, their shared meals, their evenings by the fire. The thought of the ranch, without Preston, felt strangely empty. The next morning, she watched from the porch as he rode away, raising his hat in farewell. The day stretched long without him, though Rosa kept Clara busy with preparations for canning vegetables from the garden. "You care for him," Rosa observed as they worked side by side, slicing tomatoes. Clara's knife slipped, nearly cutting her finger. He's been very kind," Rosa made a sound that was half laugh, half snort. Kind, yes. But that is not what makes your eyes follow him when he enters a room, no. Clara felt her cheeks grow hot. Is it that obvious? To an old woman who has known Preston since he was a boy? Yes. Rosa's expression softened. He cares for you too. I have not seen him smile so much since before his father died. He's just being hospitable, Clara protested weakly. Rosa shook her head. Preston Garner is a good man, but not a man who opens his home to strangers easily. Yet he brought you here, insists you stay until your house is ready. She paused her work to look directly at Clara. In the 5 years since his father died, many young women from town have set their caps for him. He has shown interest in none until you. Clara didn't know how to respond. She had noticed Preston watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, had felt the charge in the air between them on more than one occasion. But she had attributed it to her own growing attraction, not considered that he might return her feelings. Even if what you say is true, Clara said slowly, I'm about to begin a new position. My focus needs to be on establishing the school. Rosa resumed her slicing with a knowing smile. The heart does not always follow schedules, señorita. Preston returned the following afternoon, his business concluded successfully. He brought with him a small package wrapped in brown paper, which he presented to Clara after dinner. Saw this in Silver Falls and thought of you, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that Clara found endearing. She unwrapped the package to find a beautiful leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with an intricate design of leaves and flowers. For your teaching notes, Preston explained. Or whatever you'd like to write. Clara ran her fingers over the soft leather. It's beautiful. Thank you. Their fingers brushed as she took the gift, and neither pulled away immediately. Clara felt her pulse quicken at the contact, at the way Preston's eyes held hers. The following days fell into a pleasant routine. In the mornings, Clara would often ride with Preston as he checked on different parts of the ranch. She came to appreciate the complexity of ranching operations, the careful management of grazing lands, the constant vigilance against predators, the endless work of maintaining fences and buildings. Preston, in turn, found himself impressed by Clara's quick mind and willingness to learn. She never complained about the early mornings or the occasional discomforts of ranch life. Instead, she approached each day with enthusiasm and asked thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in his work. One evening, a week before Clara was due to move to Silver Creek, they sat on the porch after dinner. The air was cooling with the approach of autumn, and Clara had wrapped herself in a shawl Rosa had loaned her. Will you be glad to begin teaching? Preston asked, watching the last colors of sunset fade from the sky. Yes, Clara said without hesitation. It's what I've trained for, what I came west to do. She turned to look at him. But I'll miss this place. The ranch? Clara smiled softly. The ranch.
Rosa.
You. Preston's eyes darkened, and he moved his chair closer to hers. Clara, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted whatever he had been about to say. They both turned to see a rider approaching at speed, the horse lathered and blowing hard. Preston stood, instantly alert. That's Jim Watson from Silver Creek. He moved to the edge of the porch as the rider pulled his exhausted horse to a stop. Watson, what brings you out here at this hour? The man, middle-aged with a weathered face, dismounted quickly. Garner, we need help. Fire at the Miller place. Spreading fast with this wind. Every able body's needed. Preston was already moving. I'll saddle up. Clara, tell Rosa what's happened. She'll know what supplies to gather. Within minutes, Preston was riding hard towards Silver Creek with Watson, leaving Clara to explain the situation to Rosa. The older woman immediately began gathering bandages, salves, and food. Fires are dangerous business, she told Clara grimly. Men get hurt. People lose everything. Is there anything I can do? Clara asked, feeling helpless.
Yes.
You help me load the wagon. Preston will need these things, and the people fighting fire will need food and water. They worked quickly, loading a small wagon with supplies. Rosa hitched a steady draft horse to the rig and climbed up to the driver's seat. You know how to drive a wagon? She asked Clara. Yes, my father taught me.
Good.
Then you come too. Many hands make light work, and there will be much to do. The ride to Silver Creek took longer with the wagon than it would have on horseback, but they made good time nonetheless. As they approached the settlement, they could see the orange glow of fire on the horizon and smell smoke in the air. The Miller farm was about a mile outside town. By the time they arrived, the barn was fully engulfed in flames, and men were working desperately to keep the fire from spreading to the house and nearby fields. A bucket line had been formed from the creek, and others used wet blankets to beat at the edges of the fire where it threatened to spread through the dry grass. Clara spotted Preston immediately. Stripped to his shirt sleeves, face blackened with soot, he was directing a group of men who were using axes to create a firebreak between the burning barn and a stand of trees. Rosa pulled the wagon to a safe distance and began organizing the women who had gathered to tend to the injured and provide food and water to the firefighters. Clara joined them, tearing sheets into bandages and helping treat burns and smoke inhalation. Hours passed as the men fought the fire. Just when it seemed they had it contained, a shift in the wind sent embers flying toward the house. Clara watched in horror as the roof caught fire. The children's things, Mrs. Miller cried. All our photographs, our books. Before anyone could stop her, she rushed toward the house. Preston, who had been helping move horses from a neighboring paddock, saw her and shouted a warning. When she didn't stop, he ran after her, catching her just before she reached the porch. Sarah, you can't go in there. It's not safe, he yelled over the roar of the fire. My children's things, she sobbed, struggling against his hold. Preston looked at the house, where flames were now visible through an upstairs window. He made a split-second decision. Where are they? Which room? Front bedroom, the trunk under the window, she said, pointing. Preston nodded grimly. Stay here. He turned to the men nearby. Keep working the firebreak. And get more water on that roof. Before anyone could protest, he had wrapped a wet cloth around his face and disappeared into the smoke-filled house. Clara's heart seemed to stop. Preston, she called, moving forward, but Rosa caught her arm. Do not, the older woman said firmly. He knows what he is doing. Long minutes passed. The fire spread across the roof. Men shouted. Women prayed. And still Preston didn't emerge. Clara broke free from Rosa's grasp and ran toward the house, ignoring shouts to stay back. Just as she reached the edge of the porch, the front door burst open, and Preston staggered out, carrying a large wooden trunk. His shirt was singed, his face streaked with soot beneath the wet cloth, but he was alive. He set the trunk down at Mrs. Miller's feet, then doubled over in a fit of coughing. Clara rushed to his side, supporting him as he struggled to catch his breath. That was incredibly brave, she said when he could finally stand straight. And incredibly foolish. Preston gave her a weak smile. Couldn't let her lose those memories. Not after they've already lost the barn and probably the house. Mrs. Miller was on her knees beside the trunk, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Preston. Thank you. It took until dawn to finally extinguish the fire. The barn was a complete loss, as was much of the house, but the firefighters had managed to save the surrounding fields and neighboring farms. 3 men had suffered burns serious enough to require the doctor's attention, but miraculously, no one had died. As the sun rose over the smoking ruins, Clara found Preston sitting on an overturned barrel, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. She handed him a cup of coffee, which he accepted gratefully. How are you feeling? She asked, noting the nasty burn on his forearm that she had bandaged earlier. Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo, he admitted. But it could have been worse. Clara sat beside him, her own weariness catching up with her after the long night. "What you did for Mrs. Miller, running into that burning house." Preston shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. "I just thought about how I'd feel, losing the last connections to my family. Some things are worth the risk." Clara studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the determination in his eyes even through exhaustion. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she had fallen in love with Preston Garner. The aftermath of the fire brought the community together in ways Clara had only read about. Neighbors offered the Miller family a place to stay. Men gathered to clear the debris and begin rebuilding. Women organized meals and collected clothing and household items to replace what had been lost. Clara threw herself into the efforts, delaying her move to the schoolteacher's cottage to help where she was needed. Preston worked alongside the other men, despite his injury, to rebuild the Miller's barn before winter set in. 2 weeks after the fire, the schoolhouse was ready, and Clara reluctantly prepared to move to her new home in Silver Creek. On her last evening at Sunrise Ranch, Preston suggested a ride to watch the sunset from his favorite spot on the property. They rode to a hill overlooking the ranch, where a single oak tree provided shade in summer and shelter from the wind in other seasons. Preston spread a blanket beneath the tree, and they sat side by side, watching as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I wanted to thank you," Clara said after a comfortable silence, "for everything you've done. Taking me in, introducing me to Jacob Winters, giving me a chance at a new start." Preston turned to face her, his expression serious. "You don't need to thank me, Clara. Having you here these past weeks." He paused, searching for words. "It's made me realize how empty this place was before you came." Clara's heart quickened. "Preston, please let me finish." He took her hand in his. "I know you're just beginning your life here, your career. I know we haven't known each other long. But I also know that when I saw that bridge collapse beneath your feet, when I leapt to catch you, something changed for me." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking for promises. Just a chance to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, could grow into something more." Clara looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the hope, and the hint of vulnerability. This strong, capable man who had saved her life, who had run into a burning building to save a family's memories, was now opening his heart to her. "I think," she said slowly, "that it already has grown into something more." She moved closer to him on the blanket. "At least for me." Relief and joy spread across Preston's face. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and touched his lips to hers in a gentle kiss. Clara had been kissed before, chaste pecks from suitors in Boston that had left her wondering what all the fuss was about. This was different. Preston's kiss was tender yet insistent, sending warmth spreading through her entire body. She responded with the eagerness that surprised them both, her hands moving to his shoulders to steady herself. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day we checked the schoolhouse," he confessed. Clara smiled, her lips still tingling from his kiss. "I believe I've wanted you to since that same day." They stayed on the hilltop until the stars emerged, talking about possibilities and making plans. Clara would still move to Silver Creek. The next day her commitment to teaching was important to them both, but Preston would visit often, and she would return to the ranch on weekends when possible. "Silver Creek isn't so far," Preston said as they rode back to the ranch in the moonlight. "Especially when there's something worth riding for." The following months brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Clara's school opened with 22 students ranging in age from 6 to 16. The work was demanding but rewarding, and she quickly earned the respect of both students and parents with her dedication and innovative teaching methods. Preston continued to expand his ranching operations, purchasing additional land and increasing his herd. The distance between them was difficult at times, but they treasured their time together all the more for it. Preston would ride to Silver Creek at least twice a week, sometimes staying to help with repairs around the schoolhouse or to read to the children, who adored his dramatic renditions of adventure stories. On weekends, Clara often stayed at Sunrise Ranch, where Rosa welcomed her with open arms and knowing smiles. The older woman had taken to teaching Clara more about cooking and gardening, skills that had not been part of her Boston education, but that she found surprisingly satisfying. As winter approached, bringing early snows and bitter winds, travel between Silver Creek and the ranch became more difficult. After a particularly harrowing ride through a snowstorm that left Preston with frostbite on 2 fingers, Clara put her foot down. "This is madness," she told him as she wrapped his hands in bandages soaked in a special salve Rosa had prepared. "You can't keep risking your life just to visit me." Preston flexed his fingers cautiously. "I'm not about to let a little snow keep me away from you." Clara shook her head in exasperation. "It wasn't a little snow. It was a blizzard, Preston. You could have frozen to death out there." He captured her hand in his bandaged one. "What would you suggest, then? That we not see each other until spring?" "No, of course not." Clara hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I was thinking, perhaps we shouldn't wait." Preston looked at her questioningly. "Wait for what?" "To be together. Permanently." Clara felt her cheeks warm, but continued. "I love you, Preston. These past months have only confirmed what I began to feel the day of the fire. Life is unpredictable. Bridges collapse, houses burn, blizzards strike. I don't want to waste time we could have together." Preston's expression softened. "Are you proposing to me, Clara Adams?" A laugh escaped her. "I suppose I am. How terribly forward of me." Preston stood, drawing her up with him. "I'm afraid I can't accept." Clara's heart sank momentarily until she saw the mischievous glint in his eye. "I can't accept," he continued, "because I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Dropping to one knee, he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Clara Adams, you crashed into my life when that bridge collapsed, and I've been falling for you ever since. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Preston slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to kiss her with a passion that left them both breathless. They were married 2 weeks later in a Silver Creek church, with Rosa beaming in the front pew and Jacob Winters serving as best man. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with ranchers from the surrounding area and all of Clara's students. Clara had worried briefly about what would happen to the school, but the town council had already considered the possibility of their teacher marrying. A small cottage was available closer to the ranch, cutting Clara's travel time significantly, and a former teacher who lived in Silver Creek agreed to assist 3 days a week, allowing Clara to balance her responsibilities as both a wife and educator. Their first year of marriage brought adjustments for both of them. Preston had lived alone for so long that sharing his space required adaptation, while Clara had to learn to balance her teaching with her new role as the wife of a rancher. There were occasional disagreements. Preston's tendency to make decisions without consultation clashed with Clara's independent nature, but their love and mutual respect helped them navigate these challenges. Spring brought new calves to the ranch and the end of the school term. Summer saw the completion of additions to the ranch house, including a dedicated library space where Clara could prepare lessons and Preston could manage the ranch accounts. By fall, they had settled into a comfortable routine that allowed each to pursue their passions while building their life together. It was in November, just over a year after they met, that Clara shared news that would change their lives again. They were sitting before the fire after dinner, Preston reading a newspaper while Clara corrected student essays. She had been waiting for the right moment, and as she watched him, his brow furrowed in concentration, the firelight playing across his features, she knew the time had come. "Preston," she said, setting aside her work. "I have something to tell you." He looked up, setting the newspaper aside at her serious tone. "What is it?" Clara took his hands in hers. "I visited Dr. Harrison in Silver Creek yesterday. I've been feeling unwell in the mornings." Concern immediately creased Preston's forehead. "Are you ill? Why didn't you tell me you were going to the doctor?" "I'm not ill," Clara said, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm going to have a baby. In late spring, the doctor thinks." Preston stared at her for a long moment, as if processing her words. Then, with a whoop that surely woke Rosa in her cabin, he leapt from his chair and pulled Clara into an embrace that lifted her feet from the floor. "A baby," he exclaimed, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going to have a baby." Clara laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Yes, we are. Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Preston said, setting her gently back on her feet, but keeping his arms around her. "I love you, Clara Garner, more than I ever thought possible." The following months were filled with preparations. Preston threw himself into building a nursery adjoining their bedroom, crafting a cradle from cherry wood he'd been saving for a special project, and fussing over Clara's health to the point where she finally had to firmly but lovingly tell him to give her some breathing room. Clara continued teaching through the winter, though she arranged for her assistant to take on more responsibilities as her pregnancy advanced. The children were delighted by the prospect of their teacher having a baby, particularly the younger girls, who brought her wildflowers and asked endless questions about the baby's arrival. Rosa proved invaluable during this time, sharing wisdom from her own experiences as a mother and grandmother. She knitted blankets and tiny clothes, prepared special teas to ease Clara's morning sickness, and gently guided Preston when his protectiveness became overwhelming. "Men," she told Clara with an affectionate roll of her eyes, "they think because they can build a barn or break a wild horse, they can control everything. The miracle of life teaches them otherwise." As spring transformed the landscape, bringing new growth to the pastures and wildflowers to the hillsides, Clara's time grew near. Preston hired additional hands for the ranch so he could remain closer to home, and Jacob Winters arranged for a substitute teacher to finish the school year. Their daughter, Margaret Rose Garner, arrived on a perfect May morning, with Dr. Harrison and Rosa attending the birth and Preston pacing anxiously outside until the baby's first cry brought him rushing in. Clara would never forget the look on his face when he first held their daughter, wonder, love, and a touch of fear all mingled together. "She's perfect," he whispered, gazing down at the tiny face with its shock of dark hair and delicate features. "Just like her mother." Life settled into a new rhythm with Margaret, or Maggie, as they came to call her at its center. Clara took a year away from formal teaching but continued to tutor advanced students at the ranch. Preston expanded the ranch's operations but arranged his work to spend more time at home, often carrying Maggie with him in a special sling Rosa had fashioned while he handled the less dangerous ranch tasks. By the time Maggie was walking, Clara had returned to teaching part-time, with Rosa happily serving as nursemaid when needed. The little girl grew into a curious, adventurous toddler who loved animals and books in equal measure, a perfect blend of her parents' passions. On Maggie's third birthday, Clara and Preston took her to the spot where they had first met, or rather, where the bridge had once stood. A new, sturdy structure now spanned the river, built by the county with proper stone supports and reinforced wooden planks. "This," Preston told Maggie as they stood in the middle of the bridge, "is where I first met your mama." The old bridge broke, and she nearly fell into the water. Maggie's eyes widened. "Did she swim?" Clara laughed.
"No, sweetheart."
"Your papa saved me. He caught me before I could fall." "Like when you catch me?" Maggie asked, looking up at Preston with complete trust. "Just like that," Preston confirmed, swinging the little girl up onto his shoulders. "Except your mama was a bit heavier." Clara swatted his arm playfully. Preston Garner. He grinned, unrepentant. Most important catch I ever made. As they walked back toward their horses, Maggie safely perched on Preston's shoulders and chattering about the fish she could see in the water below, Clara slipped her hand into her husband's. Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if you hadn't been riding by that day? She asked. If the bridge had collapsed an hour earlier or later? Preston squeezed her hand. Sometimes. But then I remember what my father used to say, that the important moments in life have a way of finding us, no matter what paths we take. Clara smiled, watching as Maggie pointed excitedly at an eagle soaring overhead. I think he was right. 5 years later, the Garner family had grown again with the addition of twins James Preston and Thomas Edward, born in the depth of winter during a snowstorm that had prevented the doctor from reaching them. Preston had delivered his sons himself, with Rose's guidance and Clara's remarkable strength seeing them through the difficult birth. Sunrise Ranch had prospered under Preston's careful management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Clara had continued teaching, eventually establishing a small school on the ranch itself that served both her own children and those of neighboring ranchers and ranch hands. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Preston surprised Clara by taking her on a trip to Denver, leaving the children in Rose's capable hands for a week. They stayed in a fine hotel, attended the theater, and dined in elegant restaurants, experiences that reminded Clara of her Boston upbringing, while simultaneously highlighting how much she had changed, how much more fulfilling her life had become in the West. On their last night in Denver, Preston presented her with a leather-bound book. Opening it, Clara discovered it was her journal, the one he had given her years ago, which she had filled with her thoughts and observations during their courtship and early marriage. I thought you might want to continue the story, he said, presenting her with a new journal, identical to the first but with clean, empty pages. The next chapter. Clara brushed away tears as she accepted the gift. Our story is far from over, isn't it? Preston took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Not even close. I plan to keep catching you for at least another 50 years. When they returned to the ranch, they found their children eagerly awaiting them, Maggie, now a thoughtful 8-year-old, who showed signs of her mother's intelligence and teaching ability, the 5-year-old twins, bundles of energy, who idolized their father and followed him everywhere. Life wasn't always easy. There were droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that frightened them, and the normal challenges of raising 3 strong-willed children. But through it all, Preston and Clara faced each day together, their bond only strengthening with time. 20 years after the bridge collapsed, Sunrise Ranch hosted a celebration for their 20th wedding anniversary. Friends and neighbors gathered from miles around, including many of Clara's former students, some now with children of their own. Jacob Winters, his hair now completely white but his mind as sharp as ever, raised a toast to the couple. To Preston and Clara Garner, whose love story began with a leap of faith, quite literally. Laughter rippled through the crowd as Preston stood, drawing Clara up beside him. I've never been one for fancy speeches, he said, his voice carrying across the gathering, but I do want to say this. The day that bridge collapsed and I caught this remarkable woman was the luckiest day of my life. Everything good that's happened since our children, our home, our community started with that moment. He turned to Clara, his eyes reflecting the same warmth and love she had come to depend on. I promise to catch you, and I always will. Clara smiled up at him, remembering the terrified young woman from Boston who had found herself literally falling in a new land, only to be caught by the man who would become her heart's home. And I, she said softly, will always fall for you. As the celebration continued around them, Preston led Clara away from the crowd to the old oak tree on the hill where he had first kissed her. The sun was setting, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors they had admired that evening so many years ago. Do you ever regret it? Preston asked, his arm around her waist. Coming west? taking a chance on a dusty cowboy and a life so different from what you planned. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as their 3 children played tag with their friends in the field below. Maggie, now preparing to attend college in Denver. The twins, already showing signs of becoming fine horsemen and ranchers like their father. Not for a single moment, she said truthfully. That bridge collapsing was the best thing that ever happened to me. Preston chuckled, pulling her closer. Not exactly how most love stories begin. The best stories never follow the expected path, Clara replied, turning in his arms to face him. They surprise you, challenge you, change you. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that 20 years of sun and wind and laughter had etched there. Thank you for catching me, Preston Garner. He kissed her then, with the same tenderness and passion that had marked their first kiss under this tree. When they parted, the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the evening sky. Always, he promised. Always.